And I feel that too. Like on days where my schedule's super light, I'm like, all right, cool. I'm gonna lock in. I'm gonna do this. Next thing you know, I'm shopping. Next thing you know, I'm reading comic. Next thing you know, I'm playing Rocket League. You know what I mean? It's just like just not doing anything.
Just cleaning, just espresso.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
come on, bro.
Yeah. Next thing you know, I'm listening to Sabrina. You know what I'm saying? Where'd you get that caffeine in kilos hat in the year of our Lord 2024? Where did you find the caffeine in kilos hat, dude?
The year of our Lord. Man, I was back home, my parents' house. I was digging up the crate. I saw this old Exos caps, old gear, and this is one of the caps I found. So I was like, you know what? Let me dust it off and put it on.
I was astonished to hop on here and see you in that hat. Astonished.
Why?
That is, I mean, because that was my shit, bro. That was like,
really?
that was like, oh my god, dude. I'll clip this. So for Instagram, I'll just put up a bunch of pictures of me, collage them right here, of me wearing a caffeine and kilos hat,
Really?
like at the bar. I'm at the club with the caffeine and kilos fit on. I'm at the house party with the caffeine and kilos hat on, bro.
Good thing I waited to drink this.
Like, yeah, I was getting off in the caffeine and kilos hat.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. At the bar, just vibing. What's
yeah,
CNK,
I mean,
Phil?
like, yeah, I'm a weightlifter, whatever. Like,
you know what it's about?
I kind of don't care.
You're that old. You're that meme in the corner of the room.
Yes.
People don't know. I'm in that.
Meme right here. Putting it in right here. Here's the meme. There it goes.
Damn. All right, Phil. This hat's for you then. The old Phil.
Oh man, that's I would do anything to still have that. I'm gonna look up immediately at the show if the brand still exists and buy one.
Man, I feel so old if it's not a thing anymore. Is it? I guess not. Now that you say that. Well, I'm about to resell all this stuff then. I got a whole bunch of caffeine.
I'll give 50 right now. I'll give 50 right now. Straight up.
Oh man. We'll get it back. We'll get it back. Let's bring the brand back.
Caffeine and Kilos as a brand. Come on the pod. I don't even know who's still a part of it anymore.
Local brand. They're from Sacramento, I think.
They're from Sac, right? Yeah. 100%.
That's how when I first learned about it, but we'll get them on. Whoever's still running that.
Damn. If anyone questioned JT's weightlifting past, you now know he's really about that action with that hat on.
I was about it. I'd throw some 10s up in the air, you know? Ah!
Waiting for you to punch everything in front of you.
But I wasn't rocking it in the bar though. So I'll tell you that. I was not rocking. See, you're different.
Different.
Espresso, I'll rock in the bar, but not caffeine and kilos.
Oh man, I love that song. I love that song so much.
It's great.
All right. let's get to it.
What are we talking about?
All right. Today, we're talking about a concept that I thought was new and interesting. I was thinking to myself, wow, Phil, you're a genius. This is brilliant.
You've been talking about this for a minute. You've been using this word, of constraints, and like sending articles to the Pushin P collective. Like, yo, what are you talking about, Phil? Where does this come from? How does it start in your head?
All right, so we're talking about the idea that our constraints or limitations, restrictions, they breed creativity, they breed innovation. And again, concept that I was like, no one's talking about this. And then the second I look it up, I realize people have been talking about it in business and in tech for 50 years. There's a ton of research on it. There's like multiple books on it. So it's not new. So if, this podcast is the first time you're hearing about this concept, just say we invented it. And we'll keep it moving from there.
But how rumors start, bro. Come on.
To say that Phil and JT actually invented this concept, that constraints breed creativity and innovation. But I think it came from working on a course and starting to project out the feedback that we might get from it. Right, what coaches might say, like in rebuttal to some of the ideas that we're bringing out, right? And the course is centered around assessment, and monitoring. And a lot of the things we do in the course are, fun and new and really like relevant tests, whether it's jumping on force plates or doing isometric mid thigh pulls, doing different movement screens and things like that, and coming up with this full battery of assessments and just projecting out the feedback like, hey, we don't have that, so we can't do that, or we don't have technology, we don't have a budget, we don't have X, Y, and Z. I don't have time for this. I don't have time for that. People can't do this. People can't do that. Like trying to project out what people might say in pushback kind of made me reflect back on the things that I've done when I didn't have, technology, when I didn't have access, when I didn't have space, when I didn't have, you name it, time, whatever it might be. And thinking if something is important, you're going to find a way to get it done. Or you might reflect and realize that maybe it's not as important as you thought it was. And that's, that's a positive outcome in and of itself. And that only comes from these constraints, these limitations. And I think like it was interesting to look and see in the business realm, especially in the tech space, it's big in the tech space, that people will artificially impose constraints. Like Google's big on time constraints and really constraining people's like deadlines and things like that. Some people will impose equipment constraints, like, hey, can you make this more efficient by only using X, Y, and Z equipment, right? And sometimes it blows up, but sometimes it leads to a massive leap forward. And again, it comes from a limitation. It comes from a constraint. And I just found that to be like such an interesting topic, an interesting mindset shift. So I figured we could hit the time machine and go back in time and talk through a couple of our less than ideal situations.
Yeah, let's do it. I like that. But real quick,
Well,
before we jump into it, constraints, you mentioned force plates, lack thereof, vertical jump stuff. Obviously, when we're looking at force velocity curves or whatever we need to understand within our clientele, what other constraints do we specifically as coaches say, or at least impose constraints that prevent us from performing the task or looking at the big picture? What, anything else comes to mind there?
yeah, those are I think tech is probably the biggest one I hear right now, just because like sport science, it's not really sport science. It's just like technology used to test stuff. But that's a whole other topic. But I think that's a big one, because that's something we're kind of, at least again in my algorithm, I'm seeing all the time. Like people using some sort of VBT device, people jumping on force plates, people using timing gates, people using whatever Whoop and Aura data. And I don't necessarily use any of that regularly. So I think it's really easy for people to say like, damn, I wish I was in that environment, because then I could do X, Y, and Z and I could make programming off of that. And like you think about all these things that you would do with this kind of grass is always greener mentality. But beyond that, like there's money. So financial or budgetary constraints, there's time constraints, whether the time you have with someone, the times of week they can train, anything time related. General equipment constraints, whether it's the amount of equipment, the quality of equipment. We can look at the facility design, the facility layout, the flow of the facility, the amount of space you have in the facility. And then there's things like that coaches, it might change depending on the situation. So like the key performance indicators from the coaching staff, like if you're in the professional sector or the university sector working with a team, we can look at business goals. Whether you're in the private sector, you're a personal trainer, or you're a coach in corporate wellness, there's probably constraints that are outside of your control that are related to the goals of the company, the goals of the contract, the things that are within a contract that you have, like the things that you have to do that might not even be training related. All those things act as constraints on what you can do. And the biggest thing to take away from this is it doesn't matter if they're real or if they're imagined, because they still change what you do.
Yeah.
So if you think something is a restriction, if you think something is a barrier, then it's real to you, because it's going to change how you act. It's going to change what you do, even if it doesn't actually exist.
And we could almost look at that from two separate lenses, right? From a positive or negative lens of, oh, I have this constraint, it might actually yield more positive outcomes. Or on the other
Yeah.
side of things, I have this constraint, I'm not going to yield as positive outcomes as I would if I did not have that constraint. Would that be
Yes.
okay?
Yeah. And that's kind of the gist of it. And obviously, like, there's a point of diminishing returns.
Sure.
Like, you can have too many barriers, which is, yes, I'm sure we've
Yeah.
been in situations like that, or felt like we've been in situations like that. And there's probably a sweet spot. But, regardless, you're not going to be able to overcome every limitation. But there's certainly some that I'm assuming coaches can start to reflect and look at differently.
Right.
And then ultimately, like you're saying, like, that mindset shift actually leads to more positive outcomes.
Yeah. Okay. Man, I'm just looking back now. I'm like, what were the constraints or perceived constraints that I had as a coach that limited my view or potential to help my clients essentially?
Yeah. Does anything jump out like as like a situation where you were just like, I hate this. Like this absolutely sucks.
Well, outside of the physical constraints, I'm thinking psychologically
Okay.
for myself. For example, oh, my clients would think this would be boring, so I'm not going to do it. Right. So it was my own perceived
Yeah,
constraints for
yeah.
myself that weren't entirely true. I'd have this program written out. Like, man, they're not going to want to do this for the rest of the month. Same exercise. So the constraint there was the psychological
Yeah.
constraint of me thinking that all 20 individual clients would share this notion of it's boring and it's not fun, where it's very false, right? So my constraint when I think of it back then was that of my own biases coming in, and that was the constraint that I had that prevented me from programming accordingly based off of the actual variables in play, where that's not entirely true. And plus, boring and fun are both subjective anyway, and it's not based off of what we write down. So when I think of constraints, it's mainly that as a young coach, like, I'm going to assume this, they think this, I'm assuming they think that, so I'm not going to do that, So I'm not sure if that was in the papers at all or anything called out, but I'm just curious to hear what you think.
No, 100%. Like that is certainly an assumed constraint that changes what you do, even real or not. Again, like you're saying, that could be totally unfounded. Doesn't matter because it still changed what you did, right? So it still acted as a barrier to doing something else. But like, was that totally unfounded? Like, where was that coming from? That mindset that they're gonna think this is boring.
Probably if I thought it was boring for some reason, or if somebody like one person said it was boring, and that now for some reason represents every person in the class. Which, if I look back, I'm like, why did I let one person decide the outcomes of the class or decide the potential variables of what they can essentially benefit from?
Yeah.
With such a subjective statement of, oh, it's not. This could be better. This could be fun. Where I'm the professional here, so it was like a lot of voices, external voices, swaying my biases and forming them as a young coach, which happens.
No, 100%, 100%, and that's just a good thing to keep in mind for coaches. Probably a whole other topic around not letting the opinions of one really loud person dictate everything that you do,
right?
Because it doesn't necessarily reflect everyone else's opinion, and that's kind of goes into the importance of really assessing what your assumed constraints are.
Yep.
Like, is the thing I'm thinking actually true? Because if not, then I can do a lot of really cool stuff.
Right.
I can program the way I want to, or I can, you name it.
And I think where we started to learn, your optimal spaces. Oh, like this could be the best place of, like, if you think about a gym where you can have everything, right, and anything, and we see that as the utopia or like the ideal space. And I'm curious to hear what your constraints were with this thought of, like, oh, we could have all these nice places. And then when I first started at corporate wellness, like then I get put in a spot where I had 2 sets of tens dumbbells and a room as big as this bedroom right here to train 20 people now program, right? So now
Yeah.
those were the constraints that I literally had of didn't have a lot of space, barely had any equipment,
Yeah.
but I still have to train and get these people better, right? So that was like a forced constraint that I had that yielded me positive outcomes from the mindset that I had. But just curious to hear what you had early on too,
Yeah.
or didn't have.
No, I mean, definitely similar situations. I mean, my first corporate wellness gig was in like one of the worst gyms. Oh, well, it probably wasn't that bad, but I was just not my ideal gym. Like, it's not
Yeah.
how I would build a gym. We got 20-year-old equipment. We got dumbbells of the 50s. We got, a broken Smith machine. We got everything's falling apart. Super small group exercise room, like you're saying, with like 10-pound dumbbells in there and stuff. And yeah, I think similarly, like, no, I didn't invent anything groundbreaking, but I think as far as what it forced me to do or how it forced me to learn and grow as a coach was invaluable. Like, it was massive for me. And it forced me to reevaluate, like, what's important. Like, what does strength mean? Is it just moving a heavy barbell, or can it mean other things? Like, how are we defining strength? Like, what other important qualities can we train for a member of the general population? What are other ways of inducing body composition change without using a ton of barbells and without using a ton of heavier weights? Going deeper down the rabbit hole and using more time and attention strategies, using more volume-based strategies. I wouldn't have been exposed to those concepts if it wasn't for the limitations of that situation. So, like, that was one where it's like, hey, the barriers here are real, but it's forcing me to get better. So it's forcing me to increase my knowledge so I can still serve that population. But it would have been very easy. And there were definitely times, like, I'm not going to sit here and lie like I was like this positive kid the entire time. But there are definitely times where it was easy to have this like super negative approach to the day or to the phase of training or whatever it might be, where it's like, man, I wish I had X, Y, and Z, then I would do this. Like, I'm just gonna do whatever. You know what I mean? Because you're just like in a mood, being a hater. And in those times, like, there was no growth, there was no progression, because you're focusing on the limitations of your environment and not what you can do within those constraints.
Right. Right. It's tough. When I look back, I think for me, if I was in that same situation or when I was in that same situation, I heard me talking right now, I'd be like,
Yeah.
how are you talking about, bro? I don't have dumbbells, so I'm not going to get people to squat up. So that means like you don't have an idea what you're talking about, because I'm stuck with this situation. So it's tough to really reflect and understand, like, what is the actual goal?
Yeah.
What do you actually need to focus on? What is your definition of strength versus what is the definition of strength? Like, we gotta take all our subjective definitions of strength qualities or things that we actually
Yeah.
get better at in the gym, and that allows our constraints to yield positive benefits, as opposed to allowing these external factors to limit our view or limit our potential.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, for sure. And I think, like, again, thinking back to less than ideal situations, similar to what you brought up as far as, assume constraints that aren't real. Thinking back to, as a high school football head strength coach and taking over this contract from another coach in the area who put me onto the role. And, he was running the program one way and I came in and started running the program differently. And we had 40 plus kids, a super tiny weight room that was like the size of a shoebox, and 4 squat racks, and we had some weights, we had a ton of dumbbells and things like that. I think we had a couple of like random machines, one sled, and they're all like annoying high school kids just running around being crazy. Generally speaking, though, they did move pretty well, and you could get them going in a good session flow. But in my mind, I was like, well, we only have 4 squat racks and limited amount of weights. Like we can't do squatting and benching and deadlifting and all this stuff. Like we can't do any of this. And then I remember he came back to visit one day because I was telling him how I was struggling with the program design. He was like, is that true? Like, can you really not do that? And I was like, yeah, I mean, there's just no way. And then he showed me the programs he was doing. In hindsight, he probably should have shown me those immediately, but whatever. Showed me the programs that he was doing, and he was doing all the stuff that I said I couldn't do.
Yeah.
Right. And getting them to do it at a high level. And that was kind of an eye-opening experience for me. It was like, damn, like that was all unfounded, and I should have at least tried it, tested it, and maybe I would have actually learned if they could do it or not do it, or try to progress to it and see if it worked, if it didn't work. Like, there's really no harm in trying. There's no harm in asking the question. You might
What was
get
an
the
example
answer
there?
back. What do you mean? Like in this situation, there would have been no harm in there would have been zero harm in being like, all right, let's put it in the program and see if this works. Like, let me have, all right, we have 40 athletes. Let's take the underclassmen. They're doing goblet squats or lunges or something like that. Right. The upperclassmen, sweet. Y'all are doing one squatting, one spotting, one's doing some sort of either, accessory, some sort of mobility, some sort of whatever that's going to, one, hopefully provide some value, but two, more than anything, probably fill the time and let it flow a little bit better. And we can cycle through like that and see if this works. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Like, if we try it for a couple weeks and it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. We move on. Right. But then I at least know for sure that it didn't work. And I'm not just operating on assumption. And some of that was a little bit of a knowledge gap for me too. Like, I had never programmed like that before. In other instances where I'd worked with high school athletes, we had the space and the equipment that we needed, and we were working with group sizes that were small enough. So, being unfamiliar with that specific context, having at the time a way more limited knowledge and a way more limited understanding of training, I think that all acted as constraints on what I did as well. But again, like, either way, I still could have tested it, tried it out, rather than just being like you were saying earlier about people thinking something's boring.
Yeah.
Like, well, I'm gonna try and see.
Right.
And I'm gonna try more than one time. I'm gonna try for, let's run this for a month. Let's run this for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And let's see if it does work or if it doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah. We gotta try to prove ourselves wrong sometimes. If we have a thought in our head, right? Can we actually be scientists and like, okay, let's see. I don't know. Is it going to be is it going to give the results I'm thinking, or is it going to allow me to learn something new, right?
Yeah.
And funny story there before we kind of get into the what now part of this combo is, conversely, before my corporal wellness experience, I was straight out of college, bro. I was like, just got my CSCS, first button on the collars, locked in, right?
Not moving.
High school athletes, not moving, right? High school athletes in front of me, I had it, like, everything in the weight room. Like, there's a lot of room, there's a lot of equipment, but then I did not know anything about, like, okay, this is too much now. Like, I'm just forcing people to use the equipment because it was there versus the actual goal of this. I'm just trying to have them achieve the stimulus of the movements using the equipment that I had, versus my goal was using the equipment and then maybe I'll get the stimulus, right? So my priorities were shifted. So I think it could almost be not helpful.
Yeah.
If early on you lack knowledge from the industry, which everybody does. We start at some point where we don't know much. I think if you have all these external equipment to utilize it, you're not learning, essentially what the focus is or what the main things are. When people say keep the main thing, it's like, you kind of don't know what that is if you have all these cool gadgets, all the space in the world. It's almost too much. Like, I learn, I read all these productivity books, and the main thing is like saying no or eliminating and just focusing on the main thing. And how do you do that in our space? You can have constraints. You almost create the constraints for yourself so you can actually learn, focus. But as we talk about this, what coaches are listening, like if you're talking to me 15 years ago, and I'm like, bro, what are you talking about? Stop talking to me right now. I have nothing.
I don't want to hear that shit.
Get out of my face. But help me out because I'm struggling.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me, it was like getting to a spot that I've been trying to get to for a long time, or landing a role that I've been trying to land forever, dream of landing, and then you're like, wait a second. Like, I had to deal with all this dumbass shit here too. Like, wait. Wait a minute. Like, there's rules here too. There's barriers here too. Like, I think it's realizing that you're just trading constraints as you move around in the industry. Like, you're trading barriers. Every single situation has barriers. You start your own thing, it's got barriers. You go to a pro team, they got barriers. Like, every single spot has limitations, has constraints. They're all
life
relative.
bar. That's a life bar.
That's a life bar. Lock it in. Tat it on them. Sorry. And so I think that's a like, the grass. It might be greener. Like, you might be able to use the technology you want. You may be able to do the things you want for sure, but it's not going to be perfect pastures. There's going to be limitations. There's going to be barriers. You can have all the money in the world, but you can have a stakeholder who makes you spend it on stupid stuff, right? Like, it doesn't, like, there's always limitations. So I think that's a big mindset shift, especially for a new coach who's has a very limited exposure to different facilities and different programs and things like that. So you're kind of just operating off the assumption of what you think it's like to be in a pro environment, or what you think it's like to be in corporate wellness, without ever actually knowing. And with that, like, speaking to the young Phil, the young JT, I distinctly remember, listening to podcasts about people talking about, people think working with pro athletes is all, X, Y, and Z, but it's, it was not fulfilling for me, and being like, they don't know what they're talking about. But they were the person who was, like, doing the thing, and I had never done that thing. You know what I mean? It's like such a weird, because you make up this idea that, like, when I get to the next environment, it'll be better, when that's not necessarily true. So that's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big one for me that jumps out first. But I think from there, I think getting perspectives helpful. So whether it's listening to this, whether it's coaches in the collective asking each other questions on IG, whether it's, trying to link up. That's one of the cool things about social media. That's one of the best things about Ram's APC course. Like, I was able to link up with a ton of coaches who I still talk to today and ask them questions about what they're dealing with, and, how they program, what they have going on, and how they solve different problems. Like, knowing that people are dealing with similar constraints to you, ask them questions, ask them how they got through it, and try to follow that path, right? And bouncing ideas off each other can only help the innovation process move forward for you.
Mm-hmm. Like that.
Yes. Yeah, I think those are two. I mean, it's all around your mindset. It's all around shifting your mindset, and not looking at this as like a woe is me, I'm stuck in this situation, but looking at it like, all right, how can this be helpful to me? Like, how can I put a positive spin on this? And how can this help me come up with a unique solution? Or how can this help me level up my knowledge and my coaching ability? So I think it definitely takes time, and there's going to be good days and bad days, but I'd say on the whole, constraints can definitely be a very, very good thing.
Yeah. I think imposing your own constraints for the goal of improving the skill sets would be the way to go. Like, for example, my Achilles injury that comes to mind right now. Like, my constraint there was, when I coach, I can't demo lower body movements.
Yeah.
I mean, if I do, okay, you can take me back to the hospital after that. But it's like I can't, right? So that was a constraint. So with that constraint, I had to find another way to demo, which the goal there was to show movement, which I just thought about. Okay, there's a good mover in my class. I use them. So that's an example of you don't have to get forced into constraint. I just had to,
Yeah.
and I had the mindset of this is what it is. What now? I think as coaches, like it might be a useful skill to just take away now. Like, okay, let's just say you have a lot of things. Have a day of forcing the constraint. If you have a lot of weights in your class and you're programming to induce metabolic hypertrophy or just general GPP
Yeah.
in the phase, okay, remove the weights now. You can only use sliders, right? So I think stuff like that will allow
Yeah.
you to create as a coach. Okay, you can't speak when you're demoing. Do
Yeah.
that now. Let's play with that. Can you use body language to now still to get the point across? So
Yeah.
I think forcing constraints would be like one of the biggest things I still try to do currently to give me that refocus of what's the actual goal.
Oh yeah.
What do I
No,
lack in skill
100%.
sets? Anything else comes to mind for you of like how we can still sharpen that tool?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, one example that kept coming up in the tech industry and kind of just business in general is just like forcing imposed deadlines on yourself. One thing I hear people talking about programming taking forever. Well, put a like, hey, I got to write this program in an hour.
Yeah.
And see what comes up. It might be terrible, the first go especially, but in time and time and time and time, it only helps you refine your process. So it actually helps you come up with a systematic approach to programming that's going to be more efficient, right? Or, all right, I got, I can only do a 3-minute warm up. All right, sweet, like that. Well, you're gonna figure out what's the most bang for your buck return on investment movements that you can do in a very short time frame to prep someone for something that they're doing. Again, it's got to be a safe to fail thing. Like I might do that before like an upper body session or maybe like a lighter lower body session. I'm not doing that going into sprinting, most likely. So it's a little bit a safer to fail experiment there, but like just like things like that, like you're saying, go a long way in practicing this process of changing a mindset around barriers and these limiters and finding a creative solution to the problem. Or you might realize that, what you think matters doesn't matter. Or you might double down, like in the situation, like you're talking about, like if you try to, get a good hypertrophy workout in with only body weight or only sliders, you might double down and say like, all right, you know what? This only reinforces the idea that using dumbbells and barbells or whatever is the most time efficient and effective process for this, right?
Yeah.
And again, that's all learning experience. I think at the end of the day, like something like this and this concept in general helps us out of the two major paths that we fall into, right? It's either the path of least resistance, like I'm going to do the easiest thing for me to do right now, and something we've talked about, something that I've talked about 1,000 times at this point, but path dependency. This is how I've always done it, so this is how I'm going to keep doing it.
Yep.
Sometimes those paths are the same, sometimes those paths are a little bit different, but I think breaking out of those things is ultimately a good thing. Like I think it could potentially help us to better solutions.
Yeah, for sure. And again, these are like life skills right here, not just in the weight room,
Yeah.
but life skills of deadlines. I think we could all look back in our college years, like when there's a paper that needs to get done at 12 a.m. You're probably not playing video games at 11:30, and if you are, like it's quick, but then you still got to finish up that paper, right? And there's other things
Yeah.
that you have just eliminated because you're focused now on that specific task to be completed. So I think imposing deadlines is key for anybody.
Yeah.
If
100%.
you have a full day, what's the law of like if there's a like a full day, you'll fill it with other things.
Yeah.
Don't
It's, oh my God. Nassim Taleb always talks about it. What is it called? But essentially, like, the time it takes to complete a task is how long you give to complete that task.
Yeah.
So if you have all day to complete the task, it's going to take you all day.
Mm-hmm. Damn it. What's the name of it? We can.
So one
cut
thing
this
that
out.
he always says is if you want something done quickly, give it to the busiest person. So they only have like 20 minutes to knock it out, and they will knock it out because that's all they have. Versus
100%.
if you have someone who's wide open schedule, they might not knock it out. And I feel that too. Like on days where my schedule's super light, I'm like, all right, cool. I'm gonna lock in. I'm gonna do this. Next thing you know, I'm shopping. Next thing you know, I'm reading comics. Next thing you know, I'm playing Rocket League. You know what I mean? It's just like just not doing anything.
Just cleaning, just espresso.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
come on, bro.
Yeah. Next thing you know, I'm listening to Sabrina. You know what I'm saying? It's just.
But
like,
yeah,
nothing good is coming.
You
from
know,
that.
deadlines, imposed deadlines will, for one, allow the cream to rise to the top, which in this case, the priorities, right? Priorities of your life, the priorities of the program. That's going to show up once deadlines are there. And I think that will just give us like a way to sharpen that skill set.
Mm-hmm.
And something that you mentioned in there too was your mindset. Like if you're not doing this in your whole life, I don't think it's going to be that much harder to just do it in one aspect of your life, right? I don't think it's going to be hard to compartmentalize this mindset when mindset is like who you are. It's not just like where you apply it.
Yeah.
So I think it's like a meta skill, if you will, to really practice this. Of if you have that thought in your head, I'll be happy when this happens, then that's gonna show up everywhere else. But can you just make the best of what you have now in your life, in the weight room, whatever it is, and focus on the main goal? So I think there's a lot within that I'm still trying to, practice myself and get better at, but it'll happen. You're like, damn, I wish I had this. I can't do that. But then you kind of have to reflect and think about like this. Let's use this constraint. Let's have it be a superpower, if you will, to now focus on the main thing, or to learn what the main thing is if we're not quite sure.
Yeah. That was bar.
Tat it up.
All right, we're ending the show. That's it. We're ending the show. That's enough. That's enough of this one. Enough of this.
I wanted an 8 hour. I wanted an 8.5 hour.
No. Where can people find you?
On IG, CoachJT.HP. I'm switching it up.
Oh yay! Whoa!
I'm switching it up.
What's HP stand for?
Health Performance.
Okay.
Health Performance. So yeah,
identity stood for handsome fellow with a PH.
Let's end it. Let's end the show.
Find me on IG at Nashville. You can find the show on IG at Pushin Performance. On IG threads and YouTube.
We need a producer, bro. We need a producer to just cut us when we're just outrageous.
We need something. We need help. We need something. And if any of you listeners want to be a producer on the show for free $99, come through.
Free
to start.
Yeah. We'll be getting some Caffeine and Kilo sponsors soon, so you'll be getting
Caffeine and Kilo sponsor the pod. If you like the show, as always, share the show with a friend, a colleague, somebody you think could level up. Leave your boys a 5-star rating. Leave us a little review. Tell folks why you love the show, why folks should tap in. And we'll catch you next time.
Peace.